The Rosetta Stone is one of the most important artifacts in human history. After centuries of effort to try to understand the Egyptian script, this rock was found engraved with a message written in 3 different scripts, one of them being Egyptian. Since we could understand the other scripts, we were able to reverse engineer Egyptian. But there is no Rosetta Stone for Brahmi, right? Let's find out. In the previous episode, we talked about the history and the characteristics of the Brahmi script and how it eventually branched out into several regional variants. By the time the British arrived in the 18th century, the script had become illegible. We also discussed early efforts by the British in India at deciphering archaic scripts till the point James Prinsep came into the picture with his job at the Calcutta Mint and his role as the editor of the Journal of the Asiatic Society of Bengal, or JASB. Now let's continue the story. Prinsep learnt of Brahmi through his work which had him study old coins. But there was a problem. There were no reliable inscriptions of Brahmi in Calcutta apart from the short words on the coins. So Prinsep wanted to obtain a reliable copy of a Brahmi inscription. For this, he reached out to Lieutenant T.S. Burt to make him a copy of the inscription on the Allahabad pillar. It was an ancient pillar located in the Allahabad fort, built by Emperor Akbar. Burt accepted this request, made a copy of the inscription, and sent it to Prinsep in Calcutta. Curiously, Burt would play another role in Indian history when he rediscovered the Khajuraho temple complex a few years later. Coming back to the Allahabad pillar, it was of unknown origin. It had 3 sets of inscriptions on it. Brahmi was the oldest. The second was the Gupta script. It was a Sanskrit praise poem or prashasti dedicated to Samudragupta, an ancient Indian king of the Gupta dynasty. It was dated to around the 4th century CE. And the last was Persian. It was an inscription by the Mughal Emperor Jahangir from the 17th century. Lieutenant Burt's copy of the Allahabad inscription was published in the JASB in 1834. Prinsep would study it and find that the script is of the Abugida type. How? He separated every character from the inscription and looked for patterns. In the previous episode, we have already covered how Prinsep had a knack for deduction, like a certain Baker Street detective. He saw this character and its variants. Prinsep was aware of a few contemporary Indian scripts which were all of the Abugida type, so he assumed that Brahmi must follow the same pattern. This led him to deduce that these were consonant-vowel variants of the first character. He even guessed the vowel sounds and got a few of them right, as he would later learn. Prinsep also attempted to identify the consonants. He did that by counting the number of times a consonant appears in the inscription. He later compared those values with the count of consonants from a Sanskrit poem, but this did not result in any success. But it was notable that Prinsep was bringing modern statistics in cryptography to decipher an ancient script. Prinsep realized that he was close to cracking the script. All that was needed were the phonetic values of the consonant and the vowels. But Prinsep was also aware of the global efforts being made at deciphering archaic scripts. He feared that someone might beat him at deciphering the Brahmi script. So, he invoked the nationalist card and urged fellow Britishers to assist him in further efforts. This call for help reached B.H. Hodgson in Nepal. Looking at the article in the JASB and the Allahabad pillar inscription, Hodgson realized that the script was very similar to a few pillar inscriptions he had seen along the Nepal frontier about a decade ago. He had even made copies of those inscriptions and sent them to the Asiatic Society in Calcutta, but no one back then had bothered. So he quickly wrote to Prinsep and sent him fresh copies of those inscriptions. The copies from Hodgson certainly came as a blessing for Prinsep, who was waiting for further clues. He studied those copies and published a follow-up article in the JASB. Along with the copies from Hodgson, Prinsep had access to the Allahabad pillar inscription and the Delhi pillar inscription. Prinsep found that all the three inscriptions were the same, and both the copies sent by Hodgson were fully contained in the Delhi pillar inscription. An important dissimilarity that he found was that in one of the copies sent by Hodgson, a double letter was substituted for two single ones on the Delhi pillar. Let's take a look at this. This led Prinsep to discover that Brahmi had conjunct consonants. Now he found that most of the conjunct consonants had this character as the second letter. This high level of repetition in Sanskrit is for the phonetic sound y. Prinsep assumed that the character in Brahmi also stood for the sound y. A brilliant assumption, and true in fact, we now know. From there, Prinsep found that the first line of all the inscriptions started with the same letters. Prinsep assumed that this line must mark the victory or territory of a king, or it must be of a religious nature. We will come back to this point in the final video. In the beginning of this video, we talked about the Rosetta Stone and how important it was to the deciphering of the Egyptian script. Let's come back to that point. So even if James Prinsep had made significant progress towards the deciphering of the Brahmi script, there were still phonetic values of many consonants and vowels that were yet to be discovered. In 1836, Norwegian scholar Professor Christian Lassen found an important sketch in the JASB. It was of the coin of the Indo-Greek king Agathocles. Agathocles was the descendant of generals who had accompanied Alexander the Great on his conquest of Asia. After Alexander returned, they had stayed behind to rule over the conquered territories. The coin had the name Agathocles written in the Greek script on one side and Brahmi letters on the other. Since Professor Lassen could read Greek, he used that knowledge to read the Brahmi letters using deduction. Word of Lassen's success soon reached Prinsep, and he decided to apply the coin idea himself. In the next and final episode on this series on Brahmi, we will take a look at how Prinsep put all these clues together and finally solved the mystery of the Brahmi script. We will also understand what lost knowledge this script led us to of kings and empires. I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't seen the first part yet, go ahead and watch it. I'll link it in the description box. And I'll see you next time.